Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 5 pre-recorded lecture for our Taiji and Qigong class here in the spring of 2021. Thank you all for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about some more fundamental ideas when it comes to our Taiji and Qigong practice. And for the purposes of our discussion today, we don't actually need to differentiate strongly between what we're going to be doing in our Qigong practice versus what we're going to be doing in our Taiji practice. Last time we were together last Thursday, we started moving a little bit more deeply into our Taiji form. Um, and fundamental to any Taiji form is this idea of the postures, right? Um, and the concept of posture is something that we're probably all familiar with. If we've done any kind of movement practice, there's also this just general idea that sometimes you stand still, right? Sometimes you're not moving. Our Taiji form could be thought of as a series of postures interconnected by transitions between them, right? So when we talk to people about their Taiji form, sometimes they'll say, oh, I do a Yang style 99 form or a Yang style 108 or a Wu style 13 or something like that. And when they give the number, they're talking about the number of postures within this form. Um, One of my instructors very early on in my Taiji learning process said, good Taiji, really there's only one movement, right? You start Taiji and then you finish Taiji, and that's one continuous movement in between. And we can take that to heart, that ultimately the highest goal of our Taiji movement practice is to have every movement smoothly flow into the next in an uninterrupted fashion, right? Um, on the way there, though, we're going to be a little bit more detail oriented. And this is common to our learning process throughout anything that we're learning in our Chinese medicine school, because it hews to this traditional learning idea that if we want to learn something, what we do is we take the big picture, we break it down into the parts, then we put the parts back together and make a big picture again. And so you sort of vacillate between these two extremes of focusing on all the individual details, then focusing on the big picture, then focusing on the details and focusing on the big picture. And we could think about this as being part of the principles that we work with, this idea of break things apart, put them back together, break things apart, put them back together. It's respiratory, right? And we'll do this over and over throughout our education process of looking at sort of the big picture stuff. What's the really big picture stuff? Okay, we know that the biggest picture stuff we talk about is this idea of Wuji and Taiji, right? The nothingness, then the something, the differentiation, and then we get more differentiated. Okay, Wuji, Taiji, 5 phases, right? Oh, now we were talking about something that's beyond concept, right? The Tao or Wuji, some direct experience of the universe. And then we said, well, fundamentally, we can break down this experience of the universe into polarities, right? Which we call heaven and earth or Taiji or yin and yang, right? And then furthermore, we can say, oh, well, this polarity transforms on a rhythm. And we call this rhythm the 5 phases, right? And we started talking about the 5 phases in space that, we have the north, which is water, that's one phase. The south, which is fire, that's another phase. The east, which is wood, that's another phase. And the west, which is metal, that's another phase. And they're brought together in the context of Earth, or the central pivot of Earth, to make this picture of 5 phases participating in space. And then we also have 5 phases participating in time, right? So we could just say sun rising, sun setting. This is, east turns into west, or we could say wood turns into metal, right? Or the year, where right now we're leaving the dark of the winter, which is our water phase, direction of the north, organ of the kidneys, right? And starting to just get the beginnings of the inklings of spring, which is the wood phase, things moving up from a root, from a shoot. And here in the Bay Area, you see that the hills are already green because we've had our rain, right? So we actually sort of see this wood energy starting to push forward a little bit, right? We could also say that this journey from simplicity in the Wuji or the Taiji, or the Wuji and the Yin and the Yang, towards this complexity, right? And then putting it back together to become something very simple. And this is our educational process as we learn too. We learn all these different acupuncture meridians and points. We learn all these theories of diagnosis. We learn point prescriptions. Okay, somebody comes in with a stomach ache with these symptoms that go with it. Oh, we get all the details, right? And then we put it together into a coherent acupuncture treatment, or ideally a coherent full body lifestyle treatment for this person to address that issue. And in the beginning, it's very granular. We learn each individual point, we learn their indications, their locations, all this other kind of stuff. But once you're a provider that's actually seeing patients with any kind of rhythm, you realize that all these details kind of fade into the background, and you start to work a little bit more from your intuition, right? So classically, we could describe this as just like the process of learning music or learning a language, right? When you're learning music, you practice the scales, you practice finding all the correct fingerings and all this other kind of stuff. And then over time, after you've mastered that, you can make jazz, right? Or if you're learning Chinese landscape painting, you copy the masters. You do stroke by stroke recreations of what they did hundreds or thousands of years ago. And after you've done that for a requisite amount of time, then you can kind of add your own thing to it. Definitely a tendency in the West in our culture to skip the part that's detail oriented and jump to the sort of free improv part. Um, and that's appropriate for certain things. We don't want to cut off that sort of sense of liveliness that comes with just doing something, right? We don't always need to be tight-minded and trying to do exactly the right thing at the right time, but especially for learning something that's a comprehensive discipline like Chinese medicine or Taiji or Qigong, we do want to break things down. We want to be precise about how we break things down, and then we synthesize it later, right? We synthesize it later after we become clear on all the salient details, right? So towards that end, we're going to start talking about these postures, right? These postures. What does it mean to hold a posture, right? And if we were doing this in person and everyone was equally committed to sort of the longer, harder road towards mastery, which is traditionally how we would teach Taiji, what we would do is we'd give folks a posture to hold, like this play loop posture that we were doing together, and you'd hold it. You just kind of hold it, and ideally be able to hold it for a half an hour, right? And then after you could hold it, we'd show you the next posture, and you'd hold that. And this would kind of sink into your nervous system. So it really became a landmark, right? That your body could find very easily. What I've found in my years of teaching this is that most people are not ready to take that plunge. They need something that's a little bit more dynamic, right? A little bit more dynamic. When I first learned Qigong, my instructor said, okay, if you want to learn Qigong, come over here and stand. Come over here and stand. So I showed up for the first class and I said, I want to learn Taiji and Bagua. I want to learn these as martial arts. And he said, great. Okay, come over here and stand. And he put me in the corner and I stood there. He gave me a couple of alignment hints, which I'm going to share with you later today. And meanwhile, everybody else was doing these beautiful motions out in the rest of the class. And I'm sitting there standing in the corner, all of whatever, 22 years old and being like, what's going, this is BS. What is this? This is nonsense. But I stood there, and after a couple of minutes, I found, wow, my legs are shaking, and I don't know why. I was in good shape. I had been doing hard style external martial arts. My legs were strong, my body was strong, all that kind of stuff. But just by standing there, my legs started to shake. I'm like, this is weird. And then sweat started ripping down my back. I'm like, why am I sweating? I'm literally just standing here, right? So something in me got curious. I said, what exactly is going on here in this static posture, in this standing posture? And after 20 minutes, I was allowed to move, and my whole body felt different just from standing there. And I hadn't been given complex instructions. I'd been given a couple of very basic alignments, and there's a natural unfolding process that begins when our bodies stay still, right? And when we try to work with gravity to make that standing still as efficient as possible, one of the things that we gradually uncover are all these efficiencies within our movement, within our experience that we can open up. There's also a process that we'll talk about where we can use our feeling awareness, or our qi, our energy, right? Our feeling awareness to highlight different areas of our body, and the focus, our own mental focus alone is enough to start to unravel some of these areas, right? So many of us know that we have a stuck area in our body here or there. For many of us, it's top of the shoulders or the lower back or the knees. We all have our own places. And often we think that in order to get these areas unstuck, what we need is external intervention, right? We need a massage therapist to get in there and work on it, or a Tuina professional, or a body worker from whatever discipline we favor, our body responds to best, or we need an acupuncturist to get in there, or a chiropractor to move things that are stuck, or we need a cortisone shot, or we need a surgery or something like that. And all of these have their time and place, right? All of them from beginning to end. But there's also this idea that it's almost like that old hacker saying, information wants to be free. Well, energy wants to be free, right? Our own internal energy wants to move. Being stuck is not its natural state, because things in nature transform. Things in nature will move after a while. Denser stuff moves more slowly, right? And stuff that's less dense moves more easily, more quickly. So we have this inner landscape, and with our feeling awareness, we can actually feel into this inner landscape. And by the act of feeling the tensions in our body and in our mind and in our emotions, this naturally starts to soften the holding pattern, right? And it isn't corrective. Like I don't have to, for instance, I have an issue with the base of my skull on one side because of a body surfing accident where I hit my head on the bottom of the ocean. And I don't know what went on there. It happened many years ago and I still feel it, right? So when I'm doing a standing practice, I always feel this area. But what I find is over the years, as I've felt into this and really felt what's going on there, it's naturally opened up and become easier to move. And it's not because I've figured out, well, maybe I have a spondylolithiasis or, I've injured this specific muscle. All that information can inform, but it's not a mental problem solving procedure. It's actually just a feeling. It's a direct experience process, right? So the standing postures within Taiji invite us to engage with this, but they're actually a step down the road. The very first idea that we're going to work with is just standing, right? This holding and standing. And there's a long tradition of this. And let me see if I can just share my screen here and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more. So I'll share this screen. And so this is our handout. All right, so our handout, we're going to talk about static postures and how this act of standing actually builds qi and jing, builds energy and substance, or builds energy and sort of physical awareness of our physical tendency to manifest, because we're coming into direct contact with all the sensations that this experience of being an embodied being is, right? This experience of having the tendency to manifest, having jing, like what does it actually feel like, right? So I put down some acupoint vocabulary at the top. We've got liver 4, spleen 5, and kidney 3. And my recommendation with all of these is go ahead and look them up in whatever resource you have to look up your acupuncture points and see where they're located. Take a picture in your mind, familiarize yourself with the language used to describe this, and then don't hang on too tightly about it, right? Just take a look, let it be a preview for what you'll be learning later, or a review of what you've already learned, and then the grouping of these together, because it's nice to think about sort of the yin points of the ankle. And then we'll talk a little bit about Zhuang. So forgive my Chinese, but Zhuang is standing like a post, standing like a pole, standing like a pillar. This is the foundational practice that we really, really, really want to highlight. And if this kind of practice of Taiji and Qigong interests you in more than I had to do a couple of units of that for my TCM degree, if you're curious about it, I can't emphasize enough, this is really the gateway to deeper experience within this. This is really how you open up those internal doors of perception so that the subtle aspects of our experience become less subtle, right? And I feel like this is where a lot of people, when they're like, oh, do you feel the chi? This is actually what they're kind of talking about, because their cosmology is tight and they don't realize that chi is everything. Every experience you have is a chi experience, because the entire universe is a phenomenon of chi, right? It's a phenomenon of transformation of energies, right? So you can't have one set of sensations that's chi and one set of sensations that's not. It's all chi, but there's some subtler ranges of that spectrum. And for most people, some of us are more subtle than others, sensitive than others, but for most people, to open the doorway to this, you need some sort of regular practice where you invite your awareness to become curious about the experience of embodiment, right? You invite your awareness to say, okay, what does this really feel like? And not the words, oh, this feels hot or cold, this feels dense or open, this feels dark or light. People have different adjectives. We're not as interested in the adjectives or the mental sort of labeling as the actual engagement with the direct experience, right? So maybe your shoulder feels tight and you have the word tight, but what does it actually feel like immediately when you just rest your awareness on that tightness in your shoulder, right? Does it have a shape or a color? All that's interesting to us. Maybe it does for you, but we don't want to fixate on that, right? What we want to bring our attention towards, fixate's a strong word, is that feeling of the tightness itself, just directly, and what it's connected to. How does it relate to the rest of the body, right? And what does this piece have to do with the whole, right? So within the static posture of Zhan, standing like a post, which we'll go over some of the alignment details in just a second, there's two primary awarenesses that we've already talked about, right? And this is how to plug in, right? How to plug in. We participate directly in our cosmology, right? It's an embodied cosmology. And we said that the sky and the earth are the two main forces that inform our experience, right? The sky being sort of a synecdoche or a symbol or a conceptual hook for the idea of up and open, connection to the sky, something that lifts you up, and we'll call this ding. And I'm not sure about my tone on that, so if you're a Chinese language speaker, I ask your patience. But ding is this light and lively energy at the very top of the head. So do 20, point at the very top of the head. The idea is that you're being plucked up from a string here. And everybody has this. If you didn't have this lifting energy, you would be a puddle on the floor, right? This is your connection up. We lose it when we die and we become a heap on the floor, right? This gets severed and we're no longer connected to the world of respiration, the world of the sky, the world of the air, this world of what we call post-heaven essence, which means you're breathing, right? You're breathing. Pre-heaven essence, you're not breathing. You get it directly from mom, right? In the womb. Post-heaven means we've emerged into the area that operates between yin and yang, heavens above, earth below, right? So we have ding at the top of the head. This is our sort of yang energy, our heaven, our skyward energy. And then we have song. And sung means relaxed or sunken, right? Sung does not mean relaxed in a pile on the couch. That's a different kind of sung. It doesn't mean sedated. It means relaxed and open. Like the body has ding at the top, and then everything else that can sinks towards the ground. There's a feeling like all the muscles, all the tissues relax down, but we're not sinking into ourselves because we still have ding lifting us up, but oh, the shoulders can sung, right? So this yin and yang in the body is the foundational energetic currents, we could say, in our standing as a post, right? So these are the two most important things to plug into. And you'll see on the second page of the handout, I've stolen these, and the website right here, brisbanechentaichi.weebly.com. This guy, his name, Anthony, I forget his last name, but you can look on the website and find out. I really love the way that he's illustrated his engagement in the learning process of Taiji. And he spells it here with a G, but I think he's just mistyped it. The Zhan. Here the Zhong means center, right? And he's talking about standing in the center, and his illustrations are really clear. We can quibble about the details of his hands, and we'll talk about that in class a little bit about what we're doing with our hands. But I'll just suffice to say that our hands are like spotlights. Our hands are really, 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 really smart, and they're really rich in awareness. In your anatomy course, you may have seen the homunculus, which is this idea of how much our neurological distribution is related to the gross anatomy of our body. And we find out that the hands are huge. We have these gigantic hands on our own internal maps. They're very, very smart, and they're very, very lively, right? And this is a very, an area where we have a lot of intelligence. So our hands are like spotlights. So wherever we put our hands in a standing posture, and we can put them anywhere, that's going to naturally help us focus in that area. And we see in this picture that he's got his hands down by his lower dantian, down by his lower abdomen, as that helps the energy collect there, right? Because the hands kind of zoom you into this area. If you wanted to work more at the level of the chest, you just hold up by the chest. If you wanted to work more at the level of the head, you hold up by the head. And this naturally guides our awareness to the level the hands are on. You can also do it with the hands relaxed by the side, which is how I learned it initially, was just letting the arms hang loose and relaxed by the side. So we'll do that practice together in class on Thursday. But he's got a lot of really, really good tips here about sort of the basic alignments that we're looking for. We've got a slight bend in the knees. We've got a sinking in the hip joint, which vocabulary is also sometimes called the qua, which means sort of it's a mixture between hip and waist. It really means inguinal fold, right? The shoulders are sunken, which just means that they're not tensing up, but they're relaxed down, right? There's a feeling that the shoulder blades are gently pressing into the back. There's a gentle roundness to the front of the chest. And here, I really like what his cues he gives for the mind, right? The mind focuses on the heaviness of the legs, right? So we really, really, really want to focus on the lower body, this connection down. Generally, we find that if you can move energy down, it's very easy to move energy up, right? If you move energy up, it doesn't mean anything about moving energy down, right? So if we move things down, it naturally loops back and comes back up, right? We root in the legs, which means that you really feel into the feet. We've done some of this together, a little bit of sitting in the hip joint, and the chest is relaxed, right? So it's almost the opposite of your textbook military posture, shoulders back, chest out, this kind of thing. We actually relax the chest. Sometimes we'll see people say sink the chest. I think that's too much because we don't want to collapse the chest. That can cause actually a little bit of restriction, especially on the upper ribs and the upper lung area. But just a sense that there's a relaxing here. And sometimes when we stand, we'll actually just take our hands and just gently encourage this to drop and relax. We can talk about yin and yang in the body in a lot of ways. So yang, top of the head lifts, yin, feet sink. But there's also this idea of yin and yang front and back, where yin, the front of the body, sinks and relaxes, and yang, the back of the body, lifts, plucks, and supports, right? Um, a couple minor details that are sort of important. There's a gentle tucking of the chin. It's not obscene tucking, but a gentle tucking of the chin to elongate the cervical vertebra. And here we see the tongue is naturally placed up on the hard palate between the front teeth, right? And there's practices where we can move it further back. We don't need to do those now. We just want to keep that tip of the tongue connected to the roof of the mouth. This connects very anatomically the Du and the Ren meridians in the body and encourages circulation, and also encourages a little bit of relaxation down the front of the run channel, right? So the back is naturally straight. In fact, the dropping of the hips is going to take out a little bit of the lumbar curvature of the lower back, which is different than some movement arts and some holding arts. For instance, ballet, I think we don't get rid of that. I'm not a ballet expert, but I've been told this. And then the dandian, the whole belly, the whole abdomen relaxes. So, there's an old joke about how, if you practice a lot of Qigong and Tai Chi, you don't end up with a six-pack abdomen, you end up with a mini keg because the belly becomes very round, full, and relaxed, right? So not great for advertising necessarily, a nice relaxed round belly, but actually very, very nice for providing a nice experience of being in your own body, is having this relaxed full belly, right? And we have a feeling of connection to the ground. And then there's this note, which is maybe trickier. It says, relax the mind to relax the body, right? Relax the mind to relax the body. And for our modern information-rich culture, this may be the trickiest part, right? Getting the mind to just cool off a little bit and just allow it to be within your sensations. And this is really why we say, put away the cell phone, turn off the computer, make sure you're not interrupted, just to keep the mind more relaxed, right? So we really don't want a strong focus for our mind. We don't want a lot of really rapid fire thoughts. If that happens to you, sometimes that means during standing practice, that means you need to do a little bit of moving first, right? You need to do some moving first to disperse the static energy that's kind of raising up to the head and sink you into your experience. So moving and shaking, these are all very good for relaxing the sort of minds that are moving too much, getting back into your body, right? So take a look at this. Don't worry too much about the hands right now. So he's got the circular low belly holding posture, which we'll play with, but you can do it with your arms relaxed by the sides as well. We embrace this roundness that we see in the lower body and the upper body, shoulders relax, and we can kind of make a short list of some of these points and just make sure that we're doing these while we stand. And we'll do this together on Thursday. And the second illustration, I really like how he's kind of highlighted how this goes from a difficult practice to an easier practice as we become more efficient in our holding postures. So in the beginning, maybe the legs are not used to this. That was my case. Even though my legs were strong in a certain way, they were weak in a different way. So they're strong, probably strong in fast twitch, but not less strong in slow twitch, right? Strong in sort of the big muscles that move the limbs really quickly, but weaker in the smaller muscles that tie all the joints together, right? So in the beginning, we may feel this in our legs, we may feel areas that feel like they're kinked up and stuff. And that's because of our energy is a little bit stagnant around these. And as we kind of refine our posture and let go of some of this unnecessary tension, we're going to find that it gets easier and easier and easier, right? And we find that the skeletal system kind of ends up supporting itself. Some folks say that it should feel like a stack of books stacked on top of each other. And there's a certain truth to this in terms of getting the skeleton to align well, but stack of books sounds really dead. And there's a liveliness to it that I don't, we're not just falling into our structure. The structure is lively and it's supported by this ding at the top of the head, right? So it's not all sung into your skeletal structure, but rather kind of floating from this ding and everything relaxes around that, right? So over time, we get better alignment. The energy moves more easily. And it becomes a lot easier, right? In the beginning, this is difficult. Over time, it gets easier. And at the bottom, I really love this picture of how his sensations changed over time. In the beginning, it really felt like all the energy was in the chest. And especially if you hold your arms up, it just feels like everything up here is really heavy and not aligned. And over time, as the unnecessary stuff relaxes, our balance improves. The legs get stronger, the balance gets stronger, the legs feel stronger and more rooted. And over time, it feels like the whole body is dense. It's somehow dense, but not heavy, right? Heavy has this connotation of work you're doing, whereas dense is just like, oh yeah, it's all sort of there. And this is when our Jing starts to build. When we embrace this sensation of density, our consciousness is aligning with our experience of Jing, our experience of embodiment, right? This is also very, very grounding. So for folks that suffer from anxiety or insomnia or restless thoughts, this feeling of density in the body is very, very grounding. And in fact, some of the herbs that we use in Chinese medicine encourage this density. So we have these heavier mineral-based herbs in some of our formulas that help sedate the spirit or calm the heart. It's things like calcified cow bone called longu and muli, which is ground up oyster shells. So we find these in formulas, and this density helps the spirit settle naturally. So take a look at these pictures, give the postures a try. And then the last thing I'll say is I want to gesture towards this idea of a practice that we can do within the standing posture. So how long you hold the posture, a standing posture, is really up to you, and you can try it any time you want. It's certainly not going to hurt you. Traditionally, I think I've said before, the legend is that if you wanted to practice at Shaolin Temple in China, they'd made you stand outside the gate every day for a year, and then they'd let you in at the end of the year because you've done your foundation practice, right? We certainly aren't going to be standing every day all day for a year. We don't have time for that or the aspiration. But my recommendation is, like, give yourself at least 5 or 10 minutes. If you can get up to 20 minutes, that's great. And if you really want to do this, then you're aiming for an hour. You want to be able to stand comfortably for an hour. But don't make it, don't be a drill sergeant with yourself. Be respectful of the amount of time that you spend in this, be respectful of your body. And if you experience any kind of discomfort that isn't transitory or remains after the practice session, it probably means something's not in alignment or may need some external aid to open up. So don't push through that, consult somebody about that. But within this context of, okay, I'm going to stand still for a while. I'm going to stand still. I'm going to recognize the ding at the top of the head, the sung at the bottom of the feet, and then I'm going to sink into my experience. From the tradition that I've learned my Qigong from, there's a very powerful Neigong, or inner work, that we can do in this context, which is called standing and dissolving. And it's a fundamental practice to free up stuck energy and build body awareness, both of these things. One thing that I say to a lot of my patients after I feel their pulse is that, oh, you actually have plenty of blood and energy. It's just stuck, right? So some people don't. Some people have very deficient pulses. They don't have a lot of energy. They're fatigued all the time. Maybe they have a history of blood loss or history of not managing their resources well, and they're actually deficient in blood and energy. It's also very common to find people whose energy is just stuck, right? And so you think about that practically, like, oh, if you walk around with tight shoulders, which a lot of people do, this takes energy, right? This takes energy in the muscle of your body to keep these shoulders tight. Something has to be firing all the time. If you grind your teeth, this takes energy, right? Any area of your body that's chronically being held is taking energy to do it, right? So if we can just liberate some of that, it's like finding a bank account you forgot about or something. Not to use financial metaphors too much for describing our experience, but it's like, these are your resources. They're just locked up, right? The only thing keeping you from using those resources is the fact that you can't find them, really. So this standing and dissolving practice is a way to start doing that. It's a very simple practice. It starts out boring and then gets very fascinating, right? So you just stand still. And after you've done a quick sort of standing and aligning your body, making sure you have ding at the top of the head, sung at the bottom of the feet, making sure that all these areas that we've talked about just briefly, that there's a little bit of sitting in the hip joint, a little bit of bend in the knees, the shoulders are relaxed, we're settled in the belly, right? We begin to just bring our awareness systematically from the top of the head down through the rest of the body on just a fact-finding mission where we're not interested in the facts. We are interested in the process of engagement, right? So we can imagine almost like our awareness is like this thick honey or something descending onto the top of the head and just dripping down our body. And we just feel everything as it slowly settles down, right? And you go region by region, you just drop your awareness slowly until you have a sensation of something, right? And whatever that sensation is, we say, feel the sensation and then imagine it's dissolving by the force of your awareness. Force is a strong word, by the presence of your awareness, because you're certainly not forcing anything open. Literally, it's like, we call it standing and dissolving because you're sort of imagining that any stuck energy you sense is ice. It's something stuck and solid. And the force of your awareness is slowly softening it, right? So instead of being a clenched fist, it's now a loose fist. And then if you continue to focus on it, then sometimes it becomes vapor and just opens up and dissolves, right? So you've taken the stuck energy, and by the power of the presence of your feeling awareness, you've asked it to begin to open. I will tell you that some areas take a long time to open. Sometimes it takes a really long time, and that's okay. We can't be in a rush about this. You do your best, you sink down, you feel something, you see if you can ask it to open just by being aware of it. You hang out there for a little while, whatever keeps it lively for you. And then if everything that's changed is going to change there for today, you just keep dropping down, right? And you just keep feeling through your whole body, your whole experience, all the way down to your feet. Over time, this can be a very long process. It turns out that there's just as much space inside your body as there is outside your body once your feeling awareness starts to become more curious and more refined. But we don't need to rush this. You can take your time with it. I just recommend everybody start at the top, and then regardless of what you felt, finish at the bottom, finish at the feet, because this is very grounding for us, and then return to the belly, right? This is our master control. After we go through the body, we want to feel sort of back into our center, right, into our belly, and make sure that it's grounded into our feet. And you move from the top to the bottom. This is a natural direction of a water method. This is known as a water method kind of Qigong or Neigong practice. A fire method would be much more like try to have a catharsis to blow up that stagnation so that it's not there anymore, which can be great and that can work, but it also, the risk to reward ratio is different. These water methods are very, very, very safe. They take their time. And you don't necessarily need to have, a medical professional standing by if you open up something that's too much at once, right? So take a look at this. Try the standing posture on your own. If you can do it just for 5 minutes a day before we meet on Thursday, then that's really going to help you out. If you didn't have time to do so, that's okay. We'll do it together on Thursday, and we're going to put the sense of holding postures into our Taiji form, because after we just stand there like a post and stand there maybe holding a post, the idea is then you take that same sense of standing and you put it into a Taiji posture like play lute or like single whip or something like that. And then you can work the same process into the standing postures of Taiji. And this makes your Taiji practice much deeper and eliminates the excess tension that we might be bringing to these postures, right? The goal of our Taiji practice is to really move with as little resistance as possible. So in order to get there, we need to do a little bit of unwiring of the habitual resistance patterns within our experience, right? Zhan Zhuang, standing like a post. 1,000 movements are not as good as standing like a post. This is a famous Taiji adage. I don't know who it's attributed to. We don't want to lose track of our ding and our song. So ding, sometimes called zhong ding, central equilibrium is another thing about ding. Like if you lift the top of the head, that means your whole center line is going to come in line. And this is where we actually want to move and pivot from, is our center line, right? And then song is this relaxed sinking. Everything not suspended by ding sinks to the ground. And feng song is when the joints are relaxed and open. And this is a sense of Taiji movement that we want to bring to this, right? And then we have a couple slides here that we can look at on your own. You can also go to the website. It's on the handout, and there's a bunch of really, really cool. It's a Chun style Taiji, but the principles apply. The principles apply to everything we're doing together, learning our Wu style. So take a look at the stuff. We're going to practice together on Thursday. Please do try to do your Zhan Zhuang standing. And I will post this along with any other reading that I find that's pertinent to this topic just later today. All right, I hope everybody has a wonderful few days, and we'll check in on Thursday, okay?